Joining us this morning, SiriusXM radio host Katie McGrady. She is host of the Katie McGrady Show on the Catholic Channel. Good morning to you, Katie. Obviously, as we've been talking about, this queen was not just a queen of the people. She was a queen of people's hearts, and she also talked a lot about her love for Christ. A member of the Church of England, she held the title Defender of the Faith. What did that mean?
You know, there's a storied history behind the faith of Queen Elizabeth. She herself often talking about the fact that of all the things in her life, the stability that she found most to hold on to was her faith. And I think that title, Defender of the Faith, sounds so official. You know, the Queen was not promulgating things in, say, the same way as the Pope for the Catholic Church, but she certainly was a visible face of, this is what I believe, this is what I hold true to, but not, I've heard you talking all morning about the divisiveness, not in a divisive way, in a very unifying way. The storied history of the Church of England, of course, going back to Henry VIII, but of course now, in this particular moment, a unifying figure. Just look at the funeral. We saw members of different faith communities coming forward for those intercessory prayers, including Cardinal Vincent Nichols, the Catholic leader of the church in England for the Conference of Bishops there. And so I think Defender of the Faith, yes, for the Church of England, but also a very unifying figure with her faith.
She actually had a little book come out in 2016 titled The Servant Queen and the King She Serves. And in the book, she spoke about looking in two directions, upwards to God and outwards to the people whom she served. How inspirational of a figure do you think she is even today, at a time when a lot of people would say they're losing their faith?
You know, that's a great question. There's been a lot of reporting, especially from the Pew Research group, about how people are identifying less and less as Christian, identifying less and less with formal faith. And it might seem that the faith is one of those things, whatever faith that might be, but especially a monotheistic faith, is very out of touch with the world, or is remarkably, it's too traditional. And yet every news channel in the world is focused right now on the death of a faithful woman and her Christian burial. So I think it is certainly, we pay attention when there are figures of faith. The only thing I can liken this to in my lifetime is when Pope John Paul II died. And that was as big of an event as that was a shadow in comparison to what we're seeing today. And I think that's just evidence of the fact that there is a desire within the hearts of people. I talk about this on the radio quite frequently, and we hear it from people who call in. There's a desire within people for the supernatural. There's a desire within people for something bigger than ourselves. And here was this somewhat short woman in England who was obviously the most seen person in the world, the most photographed person in the world. This going to be the largest event on television ever. And what rooted her was kneeling down next to her bed every night and saying her prayers. That we see that in Netflix's version of her life in The Crown. We hear that in her own writing, that this was a woman of faith. And I do think the world is paying attention to the way we're sending her off and how so much of it is rooted in her faith.
You know, we can't go without speaking about some of the ways that the church has changed, some of the ways that some of the rules were amended. Her sister, Princess Margaret, almost forbidden to marry a divorced man, Group Captain Peter Townsend, King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla, both previously divorced, and we know that has been much talked about. But do you believe that it was the Queen who perhaps gave a little more grace, and that's the only reason why we're sitting here today with this particular king over England?
You know, that's a great observation. She was a stalwart woman who was not unbending, right? She wasn't so stern, so strict that she would reject the very children that she had raised. Princess Anne is divorced and remarried. Her son Andrew divorced, not remarried. We've got quite a varied marriage history within the royal family itself, and yet here was their beloved mama, as King Charles said the other day, their granny, as William and Harry have shared. And so I think her faith was stable for her, and therefore was a stability for this entire family, and is a witness to the world that our faith can never be something that cuts us off from the people that we love, because in fact, faith is the thing that should unify us to the people that we love, and the love of Jesus Christ should be the thing that brings us closer to others, not lead us to rejection. She was a woman who, I think back to the hardest thing in the world is to do nothing. And she was a woman whose opinions were not necessarily her own. She couldn't speak them. Her children, not necessarily her own. They're going to be in the line of succession. Her rule and her figurehead as the head of state was not even really her own. But what was her own was her faith and the living of it. And that gave her stability to be such a stable figure.
Katie McGrady of The Katie McGrady Show on the Catholic station. Thank you so much, Katie, for being with us. We appreciate all of your insights. And again, that's on SiriusXM on the Catholic channel.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.